I'm originally from Germany, studied business administration and engineering there, and then started my career actually in consulting with Boston Consulting Group in Germany. And then during that first window of opportunity in '99, I founded a company in the internet space, a marketplace for books. We built that into the market leader in Germany, France, and UK, and then merged with a company here in town with 8books in the early 2000s, after we survived through that first dot-com bust, so to say. And then, to my surprise, I was asked to come over and run the business overall here in Canada, and I thought, all right. Me and my wife came to Victoria, checked it out, thought it was quite nice, maybe a good place to stay for 2-3 years. And so we moved here in 2003. And we're still here. It's apparently pretty amazing. So we developed 8books into a pretty good company. We made 5 acquisitions over time, and we can talk about some of the bets too. Before we actually sold it to Amazon in 2008. And I stayed on with Amazon for another 7 years. Until 2015, never wanted to leave Victoria. That was kind of one of the guiding principles there, even though there were some tempting opportunities. But we wanted to stay here as a family. And then in 2015, I decided it's time to do something new. And I started working for a European growth venture fund based in Munich, and have been doing that as venture partner for North America since then. Really enjoying it.
Thank you. And before I ask Nicole to do her introduction, I'm just going to mention we are recording today's panel, and we do intend to share the recording afterwards. So just as we share our stories, let's ensure we keep that in mind.
No pressure.
No. Anyways, Nicole, please.
Sure. My company's Flytographer, and my background is I grew up here in Victoria. I went to UVic for a little bit. And spent most of my career down in Seattle working for Microsoft in different global marketing roles. After I had my first son, I decided to just leave that full-time job, work part-time from home, and I did that from Victoria because I wanted to come back and live where my parents were and have them grow up in this great city. So I was kind of just doing that for a while, and suddenly, when I was in Paris on a trip, I came up with this idea for a startup, which is Flytographer. Essentially, it solves the challenge of if you're going on a vacation and you're in this amazing place, whether it's Paris or New York or whatever, and you come home with this kind of blurry selfie. So for me, when I was with my friend in Paris, we couldn't get any decent photos together, so we asked another friend of ours to take a photo from a distance to kind of get that wide angle where you captured the city and you captured us, really kind of capturing the moment. And that was about 7 years ago. Came back home, and within about a year decided to build a business around it. And so the business has been around since 2013, literally started from this kernel in my head, and now we have a team of 20 here based in Market Square, and we operate in about 300 cities around the world, and we like to say that we capture the magic of travel. So that's our story.
Thank you. Tim?
Yeah, my name's Tim Tay. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Kano. We're a local independent game studio. I met my co-founder, who's actually sitting up there in the corner, on the first day of university when I moved here from Ladysmith up Island. We met because he lived down the hall from me at dorms. We ended up doing computer science and engineering degrees here at UVic. And then we went out and worked in industry. We started Kano at the end of 2008, basically because the economy went like that. And I was software contracting at the time, and people stopped paying for those contracts. And we took an opportunity to create a Facebook game as a contract, saw the opportunity of the platform, basically quit our jobs. He was in Portland at the time working for a big engineering firm. I think his traffic commute in the morning was an hour, so that was a good time to phone him and try to convince him to come back to Victoria, where everything is 20 minutes away. He moved back. We worked on our game for about 4 months. We put that out, and within 2 weeks, we had 250,000 players. And we started to monetize immediately, and we were profitable. So fast forward to today, we've reached over 30 million people worldwide with our games, and we currently have a team of 30 people based 100% here in Victoria.
This wasn't one of the questions I'm going to ask, but I'm going to ask it because, Tim, you're the only one kind of from Victoria. What's kept you here?
I guess, so in the first year, it was the growth of social gaming. So we were an early developer on the Facebook platform, and so we were getting fielded with offers to buy our company. And we got an offer from a company called Zynga, which was the biggest gaming company at the time. And they said, we're going to buy your engineering team and move you to San Francisco. And we said, no way, you know. And basically, you know, we grew up on the island or near the island. We love it here. It's a great lifestyle here. You know, you're so close proximity to nature. As soon as we knew we could make money in Victoria, that was when we said we're never leaving Victoria.
That's amazing. All right, let's do a quick audience participation. We want to understand who you all are. So can you raise your hand if you're a student today? Wow, okay. Can you raise your hand or keep it raised if you're in engineering or computer science? All right. What about if you're in business? Okay. What other faculties do we have? Economics? Artists? All right.
Unity game developer.
Yeah. Outside of students, can you raise your hand if you're a professional working at a tech company? Okay. Within the professionals, raise your hand if you are on the engineering side. Okay, and raise your hand now if you're not an engineer at a tech company. All right. And final question, raise your hand if you currently are an entrepreneur or if you want to become an entrepreneur. All right.
Nice.
That's really good representation across the board. I'm super excited. So the first kind of thing I want to do is help define experiments and bets and what they mean to us. And we have a panel here from founder to investor, both angel investor and now kind of on the venture side. Maybe starting with Tim, what is an experiment or a bet to you in your world?
Yeah, so I guess in the easiest sense for us, it's a game because we're a game development company. But more recently, I think there's the game aspect of it, and then there's bets within the game. So our games are games as a service. They're online games where we continue to add content to them. So we're, our oldest game is a game called Viking Clan. It's over 11 years old now, but it's a very different game from when we first released it. We're continually adding features, adding content to the game. So those are smaller bets that we make within the products themselves. We're also releasing those to different platforms. With the rise of mobile, we took those games and we pushed them to iOS and Android. But outside of that, I would say games are definitely our big bets for us. And then more recently, we've kind of been looking, we haven't made any acquisitions, but we've definitely been looking at teams that create games to buy and roll them into our portfolio.
Cool. Nicole, how about yourself?
I would say for us, there's like 3 areas of bets. The first would be channels, so different marketing channels to acquire customers. The second would be features on our existing platform, and the third would be new verticals. So,
can you maybe shed some light, because that's a more nuanced business terms.
Mm-hmm.
What's like the scale? Like when you're evaluating a new channel, like what's this? Like are you investing, $10,000 or $100,000 in a new channel?
So I can give you an example. So one new channel that we're testing right now is affiliates. And so for us, we're investing in the platform that runs affiliate software. So there's I think a $12,000 bet there. It's investing 25% of one of my employees' time. So for us, we're bootstrapped for the most part. So our investments in new channels are a little bit smaller to begin with. We kind of have the 80-20 rule. We put 80% of our dollars into the channels that we know perform and 20% into new ones that we want to test. And so that's an example of a new one that we're testing.
Cool. That's really cool. Hannes, can you share maybe first from the investor perspective, How do you think about the experiments either a company's running that you're invested in or a new company you're evaluating?
Yeah, so I was first trying to bring some examples from 8 books actually too. It's like
sorry, you can start there if you want.
But I'm happy to go to the investor side of it. But so you know, there was an interesting, you know, talking about real bets. There was an interesting one we did with 8 books, and I don't know how many of you know 8 books. I hope a lot of you saved money while studying using 8 books. But you know, we were a pretty large platform, right? And we were extremely well established in kind of all English-speaking markets in Central Europe, etc. But of course, we were extremely global. So a very, very high percentage, like certain months, over 40% of our books actually crossed borders. So it was a truly global platform. We had sellers in you know, almost 100 countries, right? We had buyers from everywhere. But we clearly saw that we had a weakness in South America, we had a weakness in Asia. So we made acquisitions, for example, we acquired a player in Spain, but we looked really at the market in Asia, and we found some red flags that you know, really held us back to become very active there, even though we had a UVic team actually looking for acquisition targets there, etc. But what we really wanted to test was South America. So we put we always call it like a 2-pizza team or so on it, right? So we put a small team on it that developed completely from scratch, like greenfield approach, a no-frills marketplace for South America, where you can self-list. This was highly automated. So that was really a solid $1 million bet, and we wanted to see if it can really develop into something. We also supported with a little bit of marketing, but we ran it under a different brand, and really wanted to give that like 2-3 years to see if we can get some traction outside of our platform where we would potentially dilute the brand a little bit.
Interesting.
And we had a much lower entry level in terms of fees, so we didn't want to really harm our business. You know, the larger sellers, we had some strong sellers from South America that got a lot of demand, but we want to make sure that we actually see if there's like a broader base there.
Yeah, I might ask what's a naive question, but how does a 2-man or a 2-pizza team, how does that become $1 million project?
Well, it was a few more people. It was 4 to 5, right? And then you know, at the time when we did that, it was early 2000s. Technology was actually a little more expensive than just doing it on AWS these days. Yeah. so you know, it was a little trickier there. And then we also supported with marketing. Yeah. So it over the period of time, with very slow revenues ramping up, it turned into $1 million bet roughly.
Crazy.
This one didn't work out very well, I have to say.
Oh, no, I was just going to ask, what was the result?
No, I mean, it didn't get the traction that we wanted, and when we became part of Amazon, you know, you're not talking about $1 million bets. Their scale is a little different. So there, when you can pitch something that can easily get to $1 billion, you're kind of a little lost. So we had to kind of focus back on our core business. So.
Yeah. If you don't mind sharing, you said there were some red flags when you evaluated doing an experiment in Asia. Yeah. But South America you went with. What were some of those? What was the calculus in that decision of choosing South America and not Asia?
Well, Asia was, you know, I mean, the biggest thing, if I simplified on kind of one of the key reasons, was that the average prices for books were so much lower that if you applied our marketplace model, where you have a commission fee, a percentage fee on the price of the book, the absolute amount was so minimal, right, that you would have to sell like 50,000 books a day to make it worthwhile, right? So that was really the biggest red flag.
Got it. That's interesting. Nicole, you're next on this. Can you share some of the experiments you've done? You mentioned one of the channel experiments. Mm-hmm. What's another one?
So, I mean, one of the experiments we did a couple years ago was we had this hypothesis that we could create a lot of, I guess, network effects by allowing users to self-author travel stories after their shoot. So just for context, we've done about 30,000 photo shoots all over the world, and creating a feature where when that customer finishes the shoot, they have the ability to kind of write a little blog about their shoot and share some photos and sort of be able to create this flywheel of user-generated content, so that for SEO purposes and network effects, that you know, we wouldn't have to, you know, invest so much in our content. So we spent a couple of months building out this feature on our platform, and it didn't perform. So that's an example of an experiment where we it made sense, and we looked at kind of all the risks, but it just seemed like a no-brainer to us. But what we found was, even with incenting customers a bit, we never got enough scale because customers just didn't take the time and didn't attach to it. So we kind of learned from that moving forward, that anything that we did build, we wanted to have a lot more confidence, and we wanted to do smaller tests before kind of building the whole thing out. And so that was a hard lesson, but a good lesson, and it's serving us well moving forward.
Yeah, so to kind of like de-risk yourself in the future, like start smaller and test smaller before you build up to the bigger.
Exactly.
Yeah.
By the way, I think that raises a really good point, what you mentioned, right? Didn't work out and you pulled the plug. I think that when you make large bets, right, a big piece of that, and Tim can probably talk about that, especially in gaming, right, is that you have to kind of follow that concept of, at some point in time, it's sunk cost, right? You just have to make sure, okay, I'm not getting that anywhere, and you continue to create complexity. So that is sometimes some of the hardest decisions for leaders in tech companies, to kind of say, you know what, this doesn't work, let's pull the plug, let's kind of put our resources in something new. Yeah. And I imagine in gaming it's really hard, right? Maybe you created some of the characters or whatever, and you say, it has to work.
Yeah, that's sunk cost fallacy, I think, is like what hurts a lot of companies. When you put and invest a lot of your money into that project, you're like, just a little bit more and it's going to get over the hump, but it's never going to get over the hump for sometimes,
Tim, do you have a better experiment you could share today?
Well, I don't know. I have another interesting experiment. I don't know if it's a great one, but so when we released our first game, it was a hit. We released our second game, it was a hit. Third game, it was a hit. Fourth game, it was a hit. And we thought we were really good at creating games. So we said, let's depart from our model of game that we were creating and try to create something totally different, because obviously we can create it better than everyone else can. So we put a team on this, and we gave a high level spec of what we were looking for, but we also believed in trying to give people autonomy on a project and gave it to the team to produce. We didn't really have a clear vision of what we wanted for the project. We were trying to build the game using HTML5 when the game, at the time, the technology wasn't really ready for it. And,
what year was this?
I don't remember, 2012 or something like that.
Yeah, 2012. Okay, yeah. HTML5 was not mainstream.
So we let the team kind of run with this project, and without a real product head to kind of own things. And so we kind of pieced this project together that didn't really have a clear distinction of what it was. And because we'd also seen success with the games previous to there, and we were also still playing in this realm at the time of viral growth, and growth through cross-promotion, we didn't really have a marketing budget for the game. So when that game came out, it eventually failed, and it was probably our biggest failure and the toughest one that we went through as a team, where we were actually forced to cut back on our team, which really sucked.
Yeah, that's hard. How long did it take? How long did you give it from launch to ultimately deciding the experiment was a failure?
It was definitely over a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really tough.
And we just we didn't have a clear understanding of the data to kind of point us in the right direction of where we needed to be.
That's kind of interesting. You mentioned data, Nicole. You said hypothesis. These are kind of like scientific words, and experiments can be very scientific. How scientific are you getting with your experiments or bets?
Now a lot more. Yeah.
You learn lesson?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important to be more methodical about it, because otherwise you just add so much risk to the equation.
Yeah.
One of the things I think that, especially playing in that game where we weren't spending and we didn't have to spend money on marketing, there was a time when that kind of shifted for games. So we were on Facebook platform when Facebook wasn't even monetizing games. So most of the platforms that you're on now, like Facebook, like iOS, Google Play, they're taking a 30% cut And as that shift happened, also they started to kind of cut the viral channels and push everything towards paid user acquisition. And so you would see a lot of like companies start up at that point in time, and they were like, you know what, we're just going to get to a critical mass by buying our way to a critical mass, and then we're going to be fine. But what they didn't pay attention to was the unit economics behind that, right? So your cost per install versus the lifetime value of a player. And if you don't understand that, it doesn't matter how much you spend, that you're basically throwing that money away.
Yeah. Yeah, so you do really need to have a good understanding of the financial model or like whatever model that's going to support the experiment you're making. Yeah. Hannes, the team you built and sent to operate in South America, can you talk about the autonomy you gave to that? Because that's a fairly large experiment, I guess, at the time.
Yeah, but we didn't send them to South America.
Okay.
Actually,
Didn't physically send them.
Built it
Yeah.
here. Yeah, I mean, we just let them run with it, to be honest. I mean, we looked at prototypes, right, and we had. I think that the big advantage for us from an analytical level is we had a pretty good understanding of engagement metrics, right, early on, and kind of what it takes for a marketplace to kind of really get traction, to kind of balance supply and demand. So we had a pretty good idea of, in terms of metrics on what we wanted to achieve. But we said early on, we know that it sometimes takes a long time to develop that. A marketplace probably takes a little longer to develop and to get traction. We tried many different things, but they had pretty high level of autonomy. There was a good team, actually. So it wasn't an inexpensive team either.
Yeah, oh, that makes sense. It can seem kind of daunting to hand off a team. You know, effectively, here's at the end of the day, $1 million budget and like. Go be successful, but it sounds like you. Yeah,
no, I mean they came out of you know, with a lot of knowledge actually from the core business, right? So.
Yeah. You mentioned it was ultimately not successful, but you didn't really like end the experiment completely.
No, we ended it.
Oh, you did. Okay.
Yeah, we ended it and redirected it to the ebook side, right? Which still gave us a lot of benefit. So it wasn't all for nothing, but it wasn't like a game that either works or doesn't. So we still got a lot of traffic out of it, but.
Got it. Go ahead.
But we didn't double down on kind of a two-brand strategy, let's put it like this.
Got it.
That would have been the idea, right? That we have a no-frills marketplace where the cost of participating is much lower, because for the core ebooks marketplace, we had kind of a higher entry barrier with a monthly subscription fee plus the commissions. And we waived that monthly subscription fee on that no-frills marketplace.
So in terms of thinking about bets, like we don't make a lot of like $1 million bets. We don't say we're going to spend $1 million and push that out. And when I talk about the failure that we had and talking about it from an autonomy perspective, I actually do believe that having a high level of autonomy for your team is really important. And part of that is, but having a lot of focus in terms of what you're doing. So speaking of ebooks, you know, one of the concepts that we take from Amazon when we look to make bets or we try to push bets to individuals on our team is the idea of a two-way and one-way door. So we look at you know, those are types of decisions. So a two-way door decision is a decision where you step through the door, you make that decision, you step through the door, you're on the other side, you don't like what's on the other side, you walk back through that door. Those are easy decisions to allow your team members to make because you can step back from them. A one-way door decision is you step through the door slams, and you're stuck in your new reality. And so for those decisions, you want to make sure that you're bringing in the right level of stakeholders. But as far as companies go, you can't scale your company unless you have people making important decisions at every level of the company. Because the people that are actually working on the projects and the products, they're the people closest to your customer. So if I was to say as the CEO, hey, you guys are working on game over here, I don't like how that works and you guys should do this, that's probably not the best decision for me because they know way better than I ever would.
Absolutely. I think this is something I wanted to bring up and surface is that it's you know, as executives or as founders or CEOs, like we're not the ones actually making these bets. Oftentimes, your goal is to empower people you hire to make these decisions and to see these experiments through. I think that's key. Can you give an example for the two-way door, one-way door? I like that analogy. Can you give examples of those?
Let me think. Yeah, so in terms of like a test within a game, for example, we could, a one-way door might be to open up a feature where you're introducing a bunch of premium currency that players could maybe earn within the game. So as soon as you open that up, and then a bunch of players find a loophole, and now you have introduced a bunch of premium currency that they can earn within the game instead of buying that currency within the game, now you kind of screw up the economy. So you try to make a decision that potentially has a one-time win, but you kill a bunch of future revenue that you're seeing along the line. So those are things that we would try not to make and try to kind of limit the exposure on that.
Yeah, that's cool. Hannes, you kind of touched on this, but like at a certain scale, $1 million bet does get kind of small. At Amazon scale as well. But can any of you talk to experiences where like $1 million bet was too small and like it, in retrospect, or maybe from an outsider perspective, maybe you should have gone bigger?
Well, I mean, that brings me a little bit to the investment perspective, right? So right now, our fund is kind of a growth fund, and we say we're really focused on, we do consumer internet, we do SMB SaaS, but we're really focused on companies where the product market fit is there, and we see evidence that they have some channels where they can really scale, right? So where we can hopefully help. So usually our bets are, or our investment tickets are between 5 and 10 million. So having said that, though, those companies, of course, have to tick a lot of boxes, right? And due diligence is pretty intense. And some of the metrics, like what Tim was saying, LTV to CAC and things like that, have to be pretty impressive. So, but we also did a few $1 million bets, right? And we tested that with our last fund. That was our fourth fund. And there, when you look at this, right, I mean, I think $1 million bet is always a huge thing, right? But nevertheless, we have a relatively small team, right? We're like 10 people. It's a $200 million fund, and when you make $1 million bet, right, you still go through that process, and you still put a lot of work into it, you pay attention to it, which you may not be able to give to some of the other founders, right, where you have much larger tickets. So we kind of came to the conclusion in our last fund that those $1 million bets, where we thought it's a great idea, it's a great product, we really want to have a foot in the door to potentially do a follow-on round, was probably not a good idea. Mm-hmm. I mean, one of it failed right away, the other is doing okay, but we actually didn't follow on the other one because it didn't really hit the criteria that we normally apply when we do a real investment, right? So we tried that in our last fund, and we kind of moved away from it, and we said it's much better for us when we follow our model that we normally apply, which is we work with really good seed funds and try to build a good relationship to make sure we have a good funnel. Yeah,
that's a really interesting experiment with the $1 million. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
One of the things that specifically I wanted to focus on and talk a little bit was all three of you have chosen to be in Victoria and build businesses in Victoria and decided not to go elsewhere. And I want to explore that a little bit. I think, Tim, you had an interesting viewpoint of like the economy crashed and you couldn't get people stopped paying your contracts. Most people in that scenario would move to a different city where they could get a job. Why did you decide to stay in Victoria, and why do you decide to stay in Victoria today?
So I think, when we started, so I think a lot of hands that came up were engineers or, computer science grads. They're here, or students. For us, it was really about, to create a game was just sweat equity, We went into a condo, we ate ramen, and then, the typical story, and we built our own product. So we didn't really have to hire and bring up any capital to kind of make that happen, right? We just had to have enough to kind of live, and luckily, from the contracts that we had before, we were able to do that. And then we were able to really make, for us, a really big bet at the time. But also, when you have no company, we were a lot younger at that point in time, we could just fail. And what was the consequence of that? Well, we would have gained a bunch of experience. You know, we would have learned how to create a game and put it into the market, and probably would have made ourselves attractive to employers if we had to go back and get a job. So I think if you're in that position, yeah, go for it. It's really easy. When you start to have a bigger company and you're running things, you know, your bets are, you don't want to lose on that.
I think that's a really interesting perspective, though, is that early on when you first start a company, it sounds really risky to start a company, but in reality, like if you fail, you get experience, and that experience is valuable to any employer. Like, it's actually like from one perspective, a very low risk thing to do. Nicole, you had kids when you started your company.
Yeah, kind of the opposite of
That's
Tim.
a little less
In
risky.
every way. So when I left Victoria to go to live abroad, I was like 18, and I didn't think there was a great job market here, but this was a long time ago. So I wasn't excited to build my career in Victoria when I was 18. But everything's changed since then. So like the economy's changed, the tech sector's changed. And so when I moved back here 10 years ago, I was lucky enough because I had worked for Microsoft long enough that I had a great consulting gig I could do anywhere in the world. So I was just doing that here. But when the startup idea came, there was no question in my mind that I would base it here and it would be global from day one. So I think part of that was from working on Microsoft's global marketing team, that I had the luxury of kind of seeing how big, you know, the opportunity could be. But secondly, with tech today, like, you can operate globally pretty cheaply from day one, so there's a lot less barriers to entry. So for me, that was great. And you know, at some point, you know, I had to get remote employees. So my VP of marketing is in Vancouver. I have someone in Seoul and someone in Prague doing customer service. But the company itself will always be based here, and I just think there isn't a better place to live. And I've lived in a lot of places now, and I just feel really lucky to be able to run my company here and have my kids grow up here and live here, and it's a great community. Yeah. So
that's cool. And Hannes, like, I think we talked a little bit briefly before about why you've chosen to stay in Victoria so long, but what I wanted to ask you was, you see companies globally now from an investment perspective, and how do you think the competitiveness of Victoria is? Like, does it have an advantage starting a business in Victoria? What are the disadvantages here?
Yeah,
I'm curious in that.
Yeah. So I'm you know, first of all, I'm still here because Victoria is an amazing place, right? I think, you know, I've traveled a lot in my life too, and I think it's one of the best places to live in the world. Canada is a great country. Victoria is one of the best places in Canada. I wouldn't want to change that. That's why we're still here, luckily. In terms of competitiveness, you know, I have to say, when I came here in 2003, it wasn't easy, and I don't think I was very popular within A-Books. In the first few days, I kind of walked around, you know, and we were fighting like crazy back in Germany. You know, I mean, I came from consulting into startup, and we were working like crazy, right? And I came here, I walked through the office at 5:30 in the evening, and everybody was gone. I was like, what's going on here? and this is not about, it's not about kind of, we're not clocking people, right, in terms of how much time you spend here, but we just couldn't get shit done, right? And I was really frustrated initially, so we had to change the culture quite substantially, and that, in all honesty, isn't easy, right? So we had to we hired a lot of people from, you know, Sony, New York, from Amazon at the time, and brought in people that could act as role models and attract really ambitious young talent. And, you know, this is the area where I think Victoria is amazing. I think you get a lot of young talent here. You get a lot of very good engineers from UVic and other places who understand, who want to work here. But the really tricky thing for companies is to get experienced talent that can compete on a global level and scale companies. And that is probably still the most critical piece. And at A-Books, we particularly suffered because everybody knew Amazon is it's a tough culture, let's put it like this. You can do amazingly well if you perform. But it's also, you know, they're not keeping you around if you don't perform, right? So we had trouble attracting a lot of talent because people didn't see a lot of option Bs in Victoria, right? So there were not a lot of other large tech companies where you could go when you moved your family here if it failed. So that was always a bit of a hurdle for us to attract high caliber talent. And that is still one of the key things, you know. I mean, I did a lot of angel investing here too, and I think there's a lot of people here in the community, including Tim and Nicole, right? I mean, if we can help other companies, we do that because we want more larger companies here, so that the overall level of kind of also the senior business talent, including senior engineers, is starting to grow, and there's a larger pool. I think that's kind of still the biggest potential that we have here. And you know, I have to say, Vancouver is not much different. It's the same thing. Toronto, I have 2 investments still running in Toronto. We invested in our last fund in Chef's Plate, which sold to HelloFresh last October. But I just did 2 investments this year. The first one is Nicoles, which is a women's intimate brand. Yeah. Great company, right? Company. Female entrepreneur, she's fantastic. Yeah. And the other one is Maple, a telehealth company. I hope you're all using it. You know, within 2 minutes you get a doctor. This might cook. That's cool. But
shameless plug.
So there, I think the pool of talent is significantly better, and that's still an area where we have to catch up on the West Coast. And I hope that we will get more companies that kind of get to that critical mass, right? But we're seeing, you know, Benevity, we have really good success in the gaming market. Benevity is a large employer. Checkfront is starting to get there, which is amazing. Makes me happy as an investor too. And so you know, more of those companies that pass the 100 employee mark and that compete on a global level and that attract the talent that really gets us all excited here.
Yeah. Do you think the attractiveness of Victoria as being like one of the most beautiful cities in the world, is that an advantage in terms of attracting senior people from elsewhere to come and work here?
Well, I find there's amazing talent here in Victoria for people who can live anywhere in the world. You know, a lot of people live here that could live anywhere in the world, but they don't really have to work anymore. So they, you know, there's lots of good advisors or whatever, right?
That's a really nice problem.
They're not diving back into those 70, 80-hour work weeks, right? And try to kind of grind it out again. So that's the tough thing, right? Those are also the ones that you don't want, right? You want them kind of as advisors or on your board, etc. But you want people who are hungry and who want to compete and who read a lot and understand things. You know, learn the culture of the Facebook, Amazon, Google, etc., and understand how product management works there. So,
I think that's one of the interesting things is that in order to compete at the global scale, you have to look at the companies that do that successfully. So you'd have to look at Amazon and Twitter, and like those companies work a very different way than normal businesses work. Yeah. And so it's a challenge I face and look at is how do you emulate the some of the habits, some of the positive and healthy habits that Amazon, Twitter, and Facebook have without emulating the negative habits they might have.
Yeah. And a little bit, you know, sometimes I find Victoria, maybe there's too many distractions, right? It's like too easy to go out and chill a little bit.
It rains half the year. Okay. The last kind of point I want to talk about, and then we'll move to questions from the audience, is kind of on this theme of like, how do we make room for more experiments, more young entrepreneurs, more, more new games? How do we make room for this in Victoria? How do we foster and create that?
Well, I think the angel scene is very important for that, right? I mean, you know, what I would want to see when we sometimes see pitches for angel investments, etc. Sometimes we have to, you know, and we often invest with a syndicate, right? There's a few guys here in town, you know, Razul, Andrew, etc. We look at things together. But sometimes you have to inject a little bit of a dose of reality into some of the founders, right? I mean, they read some stuff up from Silicon Valley and think they can get the same valuations, right? With no real proof of product, etc. So I think I would want to see them working a little harder on kind of sweat equity, you know, what Tim was saying, right? I mean, getting it to a point where you can actually show some metrics, that there's something there, and not thinking, oh yeah, I mean, we're raising money at a $5 million valuation, right, with like our concept. Unfortunately, that's not how it works. But generally, getting the whole angel community a little stronger here, that there's more opportunities for young entrepreneurs to get that early funding, I think that would be great, because there's no lack of ideas nowadays, right? It's all execution in the end.
Yeah. I think one of the things that was helpful to me in the early days, and it's actually how I met you, Matt, was through Viatech and just plugging into community resources where you can connect with other people that are at the same stage and have startup ideas, and you can tap people that have been there before, a little bit ahead of you, or just subject matter experts in different domains that can help you put together the pieces of your business as you're starting out. So how we can better support those kinds of networks and make them more visible, because I think I wasn't even aware of it until a friend of mine told me about it. So how do we get the word out there more at the university level and just in the community that, you know, there's support out there.
I think it's a really good point, is that there is a big community here that supports entrepreneurs and startups. And there's as Hannah said, there are some really successful people here who have the luxury of not working anymore. And they have some really great advice to share, but it's sometimes the difficulty is identifying and figuring out how to actually get in touch with those people can be kind of daunting.
Well, just like one example, like Sarah's back there from State and Story, which is a networking group for creatives and entrepreneurs that meets weekly, monthly, but just like having access to things like that so people can get together and really, you know, kind of learn.
Yeah. Tim, what do you think?
Yeah, I think events like this are really good, giving people the education and getting to hear from other founders that have, you know, created things. Going out, if you have no risk, and trying to create something and just failing and learning from those experiences, reflecting, I think is really important as well. In the Valley, you know, when people have ideas, they share them because they know, like Hannah said, that it's not about the idea, it's about execution. And I think that that's something that a lot of people that want to start companies, they get hung up on. They're like, I have this great idea, I know it's going to be really great. And they talk to you and you think, no.
That's all.
You need to go back and work on that a little bit and prove it out and then come back. You know?
Well, the funniest thing is actually when people, I can't really tell you about the idea. I say, fine.
Yeah, Facebook wasn't an idea that they came up with, you know.
How do you think people can break down that barrier of like being afraid of telling them other people because they think maybe people might steal their idea or do something? Like, what's your feedback to that?
I mean, honestly, it's like, I always tell people when somebody says that to me, it's like, listen, if you have an idea, I'm pretty sure there's 20 other teams somewhere in the world that work on the same idea. Yeah. So you better get going.
Yeah. A lot of
you don't have to tell me, but get going quickly.
Yeah. A lot of times people come to us as a gaming company and they say, I have a great idea for a game. And it's like, we work at a gaming company. Do you think we have no ideas for games? You know, it's not that. It's trying to, you know, hone in and actually focus time and effort towards that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I think one thing, you know, and it was really great to see so many hands when Matt asked about who is an entrepreneur, who wants to become an entrepreneur. You know what? I always say I've been in this now for I almost feel like a dinosaur, right? I've been in this for like 20 years. And seen a lot of ideas. I've invested in a lot of companies as an angel, as a VC. But it's like, still, remember, this is an incredible time, generally, that you can actually do that. You can actually become an entrepreneur, and if you pitch it well with money, that's not yours, right? This is like, I mean, the generation before us didn't have that opportunity. So the fact that there's a lot of money out there because of the tech opportunities, that you can become an entrepreneur and learn, as Tim said too, is amazing, right? So you should give it a shot. I mean, everybody. You know,
Yeah.
And I would add to that, like when I started my company, I had no money, I had no investment for the first 2 years. So depending on the business that you're creating, you don't necessarily need investment or money to start. You just need to talk to a lot of users or target customers and just, you know, start doing things and start building.
Yeah. Like thinking about Airbnb, you know, they didn't build a bunch of infrastructure for some of the things that they did. The co-founders went out and knocked on all the sign-ups doors and said, hey, can we come and take pictures of your place so that we can post that and make your profile look better? You know, they did things in low-tech ways before they could prove it out and then started to invest money into it. But one thing about the community here, Victoria, is that we all care about the industry as a whole growing. So, you know, a lot of times people are like, well, are people not talking to each other or not sharing information because they're fighting for talent? Doesn't really matter. No. You know, it's if we can grow Victoria, we can have like 1 or 2 companies or more companies be that 300-person company, 400-person company. that's going to attract more talent here, better talent here, and it's going to help us as companies succeed. Because at the end of the day, it's ideas, but it's people that have to execute that behind the ideas, right?
Yeah.
But it's also, you know, I mean, what Tim says, it doesn't, and Nicole, right? It doesn't always require that much investment if you're smart about it early on, right? WhatsApp is another great example, right? It was like there weren't even 20 people when they sold Facebook for $1 billion, which is crazy when you think about it, right? I mean, those are the outliers. Let's face it, right? But I was talking about Nix. One thing that really impressed us with Nix when we invested, you know. Joanna, who's the founder, she has built that business to over $30 million in revenues with like $1 million investment. And that's in D2C, right? Direct to consumer, e-commerce. That's unbelievable nowadays,
That's incredible.
right? But it's like, but there's still a lot of stories out there like this.
Yeah. No, I think there's a lot to be said for being scrappy and for like, you know, trying to do things a manual way and not getting caught up on automating or trying to scale things too quickly. Yeah, and that's kind of like, that's part of the idea with the $1 million bet is like, you often maybe don't actually need the $1 million bet. You can work your way up there quite a few times. Yeah. So we have a fair amount. We have a couple of questions on Sladoo, and then you're welcome to raise your hand as well. I'll try to scan the room as well. First question for Hannes is, what advice would you give to someone who wants to run a multinational cross-border business?
I think, you know, if you run that, make sure you build a really diverse team, right? That has kind of broad experience in those areas, a team, but which is like always true, right? Build a team where you think you're the dumbest in the room and you can really learn from everybody else. So if you want to build a multinational business, it's got to be a team that reflects that as well, right? In the different functionalities too of the business. So I think it's a lot about the team and the different experiences.
Do you see many businesses that, from the investment side, do you see many businesses that aren't multinational or global at this point?
Yeah, I mean, we sometimes see businesses, you know, we often get a little bit nervous when part of the business plan is, and then we're rolling it out to like 3-4 countries right away. That might be possible with certain software products. But it really depends on the industry. In some industries, you know, when there's different regulation that makes it more complex, it's just unrealistic, right? So we sometimes like it, like with Maple with telehealth, right? This is a huge market in Canada, massive. So why would you say you go to the US right away, or you go to some European markets where regulatory complexities are massive, or in the US there's a huge player already in the market, right? So the opportunity is really here in your core market, and that's what you want to focus on right now to gain market share. Yeah. So it's not a necessity. It's really, I mean, it sounds stupid to say it depends, but it really depends on the market segment to understand what the drivers are there. Yeah.
I think, Nicole, you're the opposite, where like you were basically global day one, right?
Yeah, we just had to based on the nature of our business. So, yeah.
I think that's interesting. Nicole, there's another question here for you. Is do you sponsor people to showcase their photography services on social media platforms?
Can you say that one more time? Sponsor?
Yeah. Do you sponsor people to put? Trying to understand this question.
He's trying to ask you if you sponsor the person so they can, like, say I'm a Flytographer on their personal website.
So we have about 500 photographers that are Flytographers around the world, and they're all professional photographers. So they all run their own business, whether they're a wedding photographer, commercial photographer, et cetera. So it's a side gig for probably 80% of them, and then 20% it's mostly Flytographer. So you will see some that put that they're a Flytographer on their personal channels. But it's really up to them if they want to do that or not. But so thinking about it as like kind of a sales channel with them to like promote the business more. Yeah, so I'll give you an example. We're just rolling out this new affiliate program, and so all of our photographers are invited to participate in that. So there's kind of a built-in incentive for them to promote the business, because every conversion that happens off links they put on their site or share, etc., would give them a cash payout. So that's something that we're testing right now.
Another question here, back to deciding when an experiment should end. We kind of talked about this on fallacy, but do you put like a hard metric do you have a hard metric in mind where if the experiment doesn't hit this by this point, we kill it? How do you actually structure that and make that decision?
Well, Amazon is a really good example for that, right? I was always pretty impressed with how they thought long term about things. So they didn't always give up if they thought that they are on the right track, right? But they had some things where they also pulled the plug, right? I mean, the Fire phone was probably a good example where they, even though they thought like mid-long term, they realized that's probably not the best product, right? In the end, it can't compete with the other ones. So I think again, I don't think there's a golden rule for that. I think if you have conviction that there's a market that's really developing and you're building a foundation in that, like AWS, at the time I didn't understand what Amazon was doing, right? Everybody was kind of fighting for developer resources, and they said, okay, we're making AWS available to other companies, right? But they were really trying to level out the peaks that they had in their own business. And it turned out to be an amazing business down the road, right? Totally different areas. So that was definitely something where if you have a very long-term perspective and you can fund it, you can build amazing things. Mm-hmm. But those are really large bets, right? I think for smaller companies like us, we probably have to pull the plug a little quicker, right?
Tim, how do you think about when to pull the plug?
Yeah, so maybe I'll talk about I'll talk about the project that we were talking about.
Sure.
So we have a new game that I don't know how many of you guys have seen the movie Fubar? Yeah. So we're making the Fubar game. Playfubar.com. You can sign up. It'll be a mobile-first game. We partnered with a studio in Vancouver to do this project, and when they initially pitched it to us, let's just say they pitched, so they released a game called Trailer Park Boys Greasy Money, which was a huge hit for them. It did really well. And so they said, we know you guys for a long time. We want you guys to work with us on this project. So it was a mobile-first release. It was in a technology called Unity. We'd built most of our stuff in HTML5 prior to that. And it was talking about a really big IP. So that was, let's say it was based off like a parody of tech companies by a network that you probably know. So we looked at that and we're like, dealing with a big showrunner, we have no experience with that. And also when you're dealing with them, it's a big minimum guarantee up front. You got to pay. So that would be like definitely like $1 million bet up front just for the license.
That's scary.
Yeah, that's scary. We never built a mobile-first game. We've released on browser, and then we've pushed that over to other platforms, and then we've never built in Unity. So we looked at those, and those are like 3 unknown check marks. We're like, that is a lot of risk. But because we knew how well Trailer Park Boys did, and we kind of got a behind-the-scenes look, we looked at this as a real opportunity. So when we took that opportunity, we knew it was going to be a big investment. We knew that this was going to be, to create a game, to create the technology behind it, we would have to scale up a brand new team on that, and it was going to cost us at least $1 million. But where we are in our company, we are also a self-funded company. We were lucky we had enough revenue, monthly recurring revenue, to support that growth or that expansion to that team while still maintaining profitability. So one, the bet's not going to kill us. If it fails, and most gaming projects will fail, so out of the bat, it's going to fail. We weren't going to die as a company. It wasn't going to kill us. 2, we were building a brand new platform and technology. So if it fails, we can now have this platform and engine that we can very quickly spin into a new game. And then it would give us the opportunity to actually have this mobile-first release and test IP behind it. So, we're going to put this game out. We will know very quickly if it fails because we understand the metrics and the unit economics behind it. We have been able to baseline against other competitors in the market. So once we put that out, if it fails, we're very quickly going to be pivoting on that platform to make sure that our loss is actually minimum, but we have a really high upside in terms of if we win.
Yeah. So you kind of, to some degree, first of all, the experiment is de-risked
Yeah,
because you'll
exactly.
still be profitable.
Yeah.
We've taken further steps because these are investments that with or without this game being successful, you're still going to see benefit from it.
Right. Yeah. I don't even as a company where we are now, we don't like to take, that big. I guess Jim Collins said it well. We want to shoot bullets. We don't want to shoot a bomb and then have that bomb go off and then we have nothing, no more ammunition. Right. So we want to test, and if we have the opportunity to see something hit, then pour a bunch of money and scale into it.
Yeah, that's cool. There's a couple questions left, but unfortunately we're at time. If everyone's okay, I'll do one or two more, or you can raise your hand, and then we're gonna wrap up. There's a hand over here. Yeah.
What is the best way to approach an angel investor? How do you make contact?
Well, I think, the best way is to get somehow a warm contact, right? To kind of get to know people. I think what Nicole mentioned through Viatech, go to some of the events there. The Capital Investment Network is a good organization, and Viatech, they work together normally. And then just talk to people, right? I mean, as Tim said, I think everybody here in town is pretty approachable and wants to help. And Canadians are, I always find Canadians are also very nice, right? Always. I had to struggle a little bit with that in the beginning. I was sometimes maybe a little bit too direct, so don't. The German direct way was like
It's candor.
Radical candor.
Yes.
Radical candor. Yeah.
Radical candor.
But
Awesome.
I think just reach out to them, right? If you have an idea, I think you will always get feedback.
Yeah. I think just to add to that, one of the values that I think is really important for us to build this community here in Victoria, that I've seen in other cities, this premise of giving back and paying forward, and that kind of like with that spirit, no one should be unapproachable. And I've taken that to heart in my own endeavor, and it's worked out well. But what I try to foster here in Victoria is this concept of giving back, and we've had people now have great experiences and building great businesses here, and I ask them to help give back because that's gonna fuel the next company and the next 10 companies hopefully. I think we got to end it there. We're at time. I really apologize. I do thank you for all the questions. I'm blown away by the response. This is really great. I want to thank Tim, Nicole, and Hannes. This has been really awesome. Thank you so much for coming out today.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
a lot for having us. Yeah.